And we are live.
How is everyone doing? Look, that was an absolutely disgusting result. The end of this Giants Commanders tie. A tie, Chris, a 20-20 tie for the New York Giants and the Washington Commanders. And there are a lot of directions we can go in right now. I think the Giants had this game locked up, Chris, if it wasn't for that penalty by John Feliciano, flexing his muscles right in front of a bunch of Washington defenders like a dope when the Giants were in field goal range to knock them out of field goal range. Eventually, it goes to overtime. There's a back and forth, and the Giants and Commanders end up in a freaking tie. It's disgusting. Chris, how you feeling, bro?
Uh Pretty much the same. I don't think this game could have ended any differently. Yeah, based on who these two teams are, based on the flow of the game over the course of the afternoon. Both of these teams had this game locked up at points. Yeah, Washington jumps out to that 10-0 lead after Daniel Jones has the fumble, and then they just basically sprint down the field. The Giants looked flat as hell on those first those first four drives, and then all of a sudden you get Darius Slayton with that big catch, and the Giants come roaring back, take the lead, go on a 20-3 run, and then stop. And then Washington sprints down the field, scores, looks like they're going to retake the momentum, come back with the win in the fourth quarter, and then they just fall flat on their face and start shooting themselves in the foot with penalties and mistakes. And really, there's no other way this game could have finished, I think.
Unfortunately, and there were times throughout this game too, Chris, where the defense, which the secondary has issues. I felt like Taylor Heineke and their offense just were circling Zion Gilbert and saying, we're going to attack this kid. And unfortunately, the kid did not really rise to the occasion in a lot of different situations. But there were times when the defense actually did, and they forced punts in really key pivotal spots. And you're like, okay, all the Giants have to do is drive down the football field, get a field goal, get some points on the board. But then they could never really manage to do that all that often in this game. And it just wasn't really complimentary football going on. And that was one of the big issues here.
No, this game really was a mirror match. This was the same team on both sides. Yeah, the Giants, they want to run the ball. They don't have much else if the running game isn't working, and they want to play absolutely suffocating defense. They want to disrupt in the backfield. They want to get pressure and really just win that kind of old school way. It's definitely a new school flavor, but an old school mentality. And Washington is exactly the same way. I think they're maybe a little bit more willing with Taylor Heineke and Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, those guys, to attack downfield than the Giants are. But it all comes off of the running game and that defensive front of theirs getting pressure, being stout at the point of attack. And both of these teams have a very narrow path to victory in any game they play. And unfortunately, the Giants just kind of went outside of that path. Of course, fortunately, I suppose. This is really a glass half empty, glass half full type game, I suppose. Washington went way outside of their path to victory as well.
It's just crazy, man. The Giants had an opportunity to win this football game. And on that 3rd and 2, there was just a huge miscommunication, probably by Richie James, because this offense didn't do anything new, really too much new or novel. It was still a lot of those play action boot, get Daniel Jones on the move, slide someone underneath him, those types of plays. And I felt like Washington did a good job sniffing that out. But on that pivotal, what was it, a 3rd and 2 play towards the end of the game where the Giants just needed 2 yards to advance football and eventually possibly maybe win this football game, Richie James and Saquon Barkley run into each other on what looked like a zone read RPO, something Mike Kafka calls so often. And it's just like you can't have those types of mistakes in we got ESPN interrupting us. You just can't have those types of mistakes in those types of situations. And this game started with a huge mistake too, with the Daniel Jones fumble, but the Giants were able to be resilient and battle back from that. But those mistakes and just little mental errors and undisciplined type of play, like the John Feliciano penalty, lead to you not winning this football game, essentially. That's essentially what happened.
Yes, and really neither one of these teams were particularly disciplined. I thought the Giants had the advantage there early on, especially after that first touchdown that got Washington up to the 10-0 lead. The Giants really buckled down. They found the energy that they had played with earlier in the season, and they found the discipline they had played with earlier in the season. But they lost their composure as the pressure ratcheted up. It almost feels like the game tried to snowball on both teams at the same time.
It did, and that's why nobody deserved the win, essentially. That's what it came down to. But
and I think that's kind of the way I feel about this game. Neither one of these teams really earned the right to win this game.
We have a comment here from, who is it? Mega Giants 89. Honestly, I think a tie benefits New York more than Washington. Well, Washington at least isn't getting that win now to jump over the New York Giants, and they have a date in 2 weeks. I think I've said this on the podcast before, Chris. It's a little unfortunate that Washington gets the game plan for the New York Giants 3 weeks in a row, playing this game, going on a bye, and then playing the Giants again in Washington. So this was the game to win. There were plenty of opportunities for the New York Giants to win, despite the fact that they weren't playing the smartest football, and they just couldn't get it done. And that's a huge disappointment.
Yeah, Washington really did, especially in the second quarter and into the third quarter, do everything they could to help the Giants win. And the Giants, for once, just did not take advantage of those opportunities. Now, I have to say, credit to both defenses. Both defensive fronts stepped up. That, I think, is kind of the story of this game. And if we want to hand out a game ball, we have to give it to Kayvon Thibodeaux. He was an absolute menace this game. Like, he has really turned it on over the last couple of weeks. Like, you can see, not only has he gotten the quickness back that he had at Oregon. I think he's really put that calf injury, an MCL injury, behind him. But I think the game is also slowing down for him as well. I mean, it also helps when your left tackle doesn't block you at all.
Yeah, I'm not trying to take anything away from Kayvon Thibodeaux, but some of those really high energy type of reps that he didn't have to defeat any blockers. I think Dexter Lawrence could deserve a game ball. He was splitting double teams and just giving the interior offensive line of Washington a ton to have to work with. And we're getting questions here. Blue Wave asks, why does it seem like the offense can move or can't move, I think is what he's meaning to say, in key situations? If the defenses are loading up to stop the run, I would have thought we would throw more to take advantage and counteract that stance. Yeah, me too, Blue Wave. But there are times in this game where the Giants would run the football on first down, and then they would try to come out and pass. And what happened? Mark Lewinsky just gets absolutely dominated by Jonathan Allen or Daron Payne, leads to a sack or leads to a pressure. This interior offensive line is a big issue for the Giants. And I know we talked a lot about how it was upgraded significantly during the offseason, and I still think it was. But Lewinsky's really bad at pass protection. You need to really start thinking about maybe replacing him. And I know he had a huge block on one of those key runs in the first half, but if you just allow a defender to run through one of your shoulders right into the pocket to harass Daniel Jones, hit Daniel Jones, sack Daniel Jones, like if you have other options, like if Josh Azuda comes back healthy, when Ben Bredesen is already up to speed to play, I think you really need to start looking into replacing Lewinsky.
I agree. Even if the replacement doesn't happen this year, the Giants are definitely going to have to look at the interior offensive line in the draft or in free agency, depending on what strategy they decide to take, because that is a problem, especially given the defensive fronts in this division as a whole. Because Dallas has a great defensive front, which we saw last week. The Washington has John Allen, Daron Payne, Montez Sweat is very good. They're going to be getting Chase Young back, which something the Giants can look forward to in 2 weeks. It's really difficult to find a place to get a double team in the NFC East right now, because the Giants, as far as the other offensive lines are concerned, have a very good defensive front. It really is something that the Giants have to address going forward. I'm just not sure if there is a marked upgrade there on the roster right now.
Sasha Graves asks, is Gates the only keeper on the interior part of the offensive line. When Josh Azudu is healthy, Azudu is definitely a keeper. As for John Feliciano and Mark Glowinski's here under contract still for a couple more seasons, which is something that the Giants, I mean, I think he'd be a fine rotational player. He could possibly start, but these pass protection issues have been horrendous for Glowinski. And as for Feliciano, this is his only year on contract. I don't really think the Giants are going to bring him back. If they do, it's going to be like a vet minimum type of contract. So yes, I think Gates is definitely a keeper. He had a couple bad reps. He always struggles, Chris, just going back through the years of Nick Gates. He always struggled against Daron Payne and
Yes.
Jonathan Allen. Like those two specifically have always given Nick Gates problems.
Yes. And we've talked a lot about the progress that Dexter Lawrence has made this year, improving his technique and really unleashing his explosiveness, his athleticism, his power. Daron Payne has made similar strides, which is not great news for that Giants offensive line. He worked on building his agility in the offseason. He went to Von Miller's pass rush summit.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen the fruits of that firsthand this game. He has become a very good defensive tackle. And again, reasons why the Giants need to find upgrades for their interior offensive line.
Chris, what happened at the end of the first half when the Giants, they had the 13 play 66-yard drive? Did you think that it was a little bit of like odd play calling in terms of how they handled the clock?
Yes and no. I think the Giants, in part of it was they were playing to not make a mistake, which, I'm not sure how I feel about that more cautious tact from Brian Daboll. Being aggressive has helped them earlier in the season, at least aggressive in his mentality, if not the, attacking downfield. But also, I think the Giants were reacting to the defenses that Washington was calling. I think they were just running a box count offense, because at times it looked like Washington only had 4 or 5 guys in the box. And if you're just counting defenders and deciding whether to run or throw, then you see 4 guys in front of you. Running is a no-brainer, even with the clock situation being what it was, especially given how well the Giants defense was playing through that point in the game.
Yeah, and speaking of just playing well, Daniel Jones finished with solid stats, I would say, 25 of 31 for 200 yards. So he got that 200-yard marker with the touchdown to Isaiah Hodgins on a very nice little pivot route. I felt like for someone who's 6'4", he really sold that inside break and broke pretty quickly towards the pylon. So Isaiah Hodgins continues to prove his worth here. 5 catches, 44 yards on 6 targets with that touchdown. But a lot of this passing attack is still, it's the same, Chris. It's still those, like we said, play action slides. Just get the football out of Daniel Jones' hands, quick game, quick stick routes. Not a lot of airing it out, except for those first 2, the first and 10, and then the second and 10, and then obviously the 55-yard gain to Darius Slayton. It seems like when the Giants are in those middle of the field closed looks, they're going to oblige and take those one-on-one matchups. I'm a little surprised they did it on 2 consecutive plays, though, on that first down and second down to set up the 3rd and 10, which eventually led to a punt. Because if they were able to matriculate the ball down the field in that situation, I'm not chastising it, but if they were able to in that situation, they might have been able to kick a field goal and just win the game at that point.
Yes, but I do think the Giants were really respecting the kind of pressure that Washington was able to bring. I've got next gen stats open right now, and of the teams that have played so far, Daniel Jones is tied with Trevor Lawrence for the fastest time to throw at 2.41 seconds, which is lightning fast compared to what he has put up over the course of this year. And he also has the second shortest converted air yards out there at 2.7. And that's with that long pass to Darius Slayton, bringing up his average. Now, just for the quick math, that's about 8 feet 1 inch downfield in the air. So the Giants definitely planned to hit a lot of very quick passes designed to get the ball to their receivers in space with room to pick up yards after the catch. They really didn't want Jones dropping back, holding the ball, surveying the field all that often. And I honestly can't blame them on that.
Well, they haven't wanted him to do that the entire season.
Well,
the entire this passing attack by the New York Giants is pretty wild, man. Like, so many of it is built off the play action. It's just getting Jones on the run. And that's what I feel like you should do when you have a quarterback like Daniel Jones. Because how many times in this game, especially in the first half, did Daniel Jones not like what he saw? And sometimes it wasn't even on design runs, but he would just take that B gap, take that opening, and then sprint for several yards. How many rushing yards did Daniel Jones finish with? He finished 12 for 71. Like that's a lot of rushing yards from your quarterback position. Yeah, Saquon Barkley, 18 carries, 63 yards with that touchdown, but still he had like an average of 3.5 yards. I felt like early in the game, maybe the Giants were going to be able to run the football more effectively than I felt coming into the game, but that just kind of stagnated as the game went on.
It did. And I think that is also part of the reason for the Giants appearing to have a very efficient offense, but not getting much done with it. They went for those early down rushes. I haven't looked to see how many runs they started their drives with. They started the game with nothing but runs, and it didn't really amount to a whole lot. But I think Washington really buckling down and controlling those interior gaps and rallying to the football and picking up some pretty big tackles for a loss on Saquon Barkley that really held the Giants back, put them in really long yardage situations for second and third down.
That was a big issue with the rushing attack, specifically in the second half. And to flip it over to the defense for a little bit, how much, Chris, does this defense miss Xavier McKinney and Adoree Jackson, and the focus on the latter player when Terry McLaurin was doing Terry McLaurin type things? So like, don't you wish Adoree was out there just gluing on this guy? Not that Terry McLaurin couldn't win that matchup every now and again, but it's just unfortunate seeing Nick McCloud playing well over his head. And he still had some plays where you're like, okay, good job, number 44. That's excellent. But the injuries on this secondary right now and in this defense, and really on this team in general, they're a lot to overcome. Like, this team needs to get healthy quick. And I still felt like the Giants, despite the fact that they didn't have the secondary pieces, got really good pressure on Taylor Heinicke, who was sacked how many times? 5 times in this game by the Giants.
Yeah, now it did help that Washington was down to their second string, third string right guard by the end of the game. So I think that did help the Giants' interior offensive line, which also I think helped their edge rushers because it collapsed the pocket and really didn't give Heinicke anywhere to escape to. But also, I thought the Giants did a good job, at least early in routes, forcing Heinicke to hold the ball. They didn't give away too many quick releases to those Washington receivers. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, those guys are all very quick. They're good route runners. They're going to be tough to stifle for any amount of time, but they did give the pass rush enough time to get home and to really pressure and disrupt Heinicke. Just, not quite enough to keep Washington from tying up the game.
Yeah, I see that a lot of people are roasting Moreau, and Moreau did not have his best game by any stretch of the imagination, but he still might be the best player out there in the secondary at the cornerback position for the Giants, which is saying a lot about the state of the cornerback position. I'll say this about Moreau. He, yes, was wildly inconsistent, as some people are saying, and he did not play well. That play on 3rd and 10 against Cam Sims, I think it was a really nice play. He played through the catch point. It was at the end of the 6-play, 26-yard drive, right after the drive after Washington tied the game up at 2020. That was a big moment in the game around midfield where Moreau came up with a big play. It's just the Giants offense at that time. I mean, there was nothing else to really do for the Giants. The Giants offense couldn't really convert. And next thing you know, the game is over and the Giants are heading to overtime.
Yes. Now, I have to say the officials in this game, I think they were using the college rules as far as pass interference were concerned. Yeah, they were letting guys play downfield. They were letting both the wide receivers and the defensive backs be very, very physical. Yeah, I think another officiating crew would not have picked up that pass interference flag on Moreau. And another officiating crew might have thrown an offensive pass interference flag on Darius Slayton on his big pass, because he did kind of push off on Christian Holmes there.
Yeah.
But at least they were consistent downfield and didn't throw a flag for offensive pass interference later on in the game when the tables were turned and it was a Washington receiver kind of holding on and preventing an interception. So yeah, those no calls went the Giants' way, which I know a lot of fans feel was payback for the week before. I don't like to think that way. I don't think you should, having another team feel like they're getting screwed over as, justice for your own team getting screwed over. I like it when officials just call the game down the middle and really just stay the hell out of the way.
Yeah, that's the best way to officiate. And that's why I did not mind the fact that they didn't throw the flags on those plays. They weren't egregious enough to warrant a flag, in my opinion. But Chris, do you have anything else on this tie, which is just weird to say, from the New York Giants and the Commanders, or are you just ready to get into the tape?
Yeah, I'm just ready to get into the tape. And honestly, I'm kind of just ready to put this whole game behind me and get on to Philadelphia.
Yeah, and Philadelphia put on a clinic today against Tennessee, so that's going to be a quite the matchup, and we'll have to wait and see. But
this secondary, the way it is against Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, oof.
Yeah, oof is a good way to put it. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Chris and Nick show here on Big Blue View Radio. Wish the Giants got the win. Did not. Tied with the Washington Commanders. We'll see what they can do next week and then the week after against those said Washington Commanders. But thank you, everyone. Take care of each other and have a lovely day.